So we talked about the Ethernet shield, and now we'll talk about a Wi-Fi shield. Actually, it's relatively similar. I mean, what it does at a high level is basically the same thing as an Ethernet shield. It allows you to connect to the internet, but it does it through a wireless interface rather than a wired interface like an Ethernet shield would do. So in a lot of ways, it's very similar from a programmer's point of view. You connect to sending data on one shield versus sending another. It's a very similar operation. Now, there are some differences, and we'll talk about those. The standard, the IEEE standard used is 802.11. There are varieties of this. B's, there are a lot of different suffixes. N, I can't remember which one they're on now, but 802.11 something is the current Wi-Fi standard. So the library is similar to the Ethernet library, not exactly the same though. So Wi-Fi initialization. So what do you do first? Wi-Fi.begin, so that's very common. No arguments, right? No arguments. If you pass no arguments, it just initializes the shield. So that's one way to call Wi-Fi.begin. Just no arguments, it powers up the shield and initializes it. Now, a common way to do it is to say Wi-Fi, call Wi-Fi.begin with one argument. SSID. SSID is the name of the network that you want to connect to. Now, this is something you don't generally have with an Ethernet shield. You don't have a choice of networks to connect to. You just got a network and you connect to it. But with Wi-Fi, you often can view many networks, right? So you got to pick one, and SSID is the name of that network. So you pass that as an argument, it'll connect to that network. Now, you can also call Wi-Fi.begin with two arguments. The first argument is the SSID. The second argument is the password. Now, you would use this if the network had used WPA2 encryption and it required a password. So you'd pass the password as an argument so that you could connect to the network. Now, another way to do it is to call Wi-Fi.begin with three arguments. The SSID and then a key index and a key. So this is used when you're using, when the network uses WEP encryption. And when it does that, WEP encryption has several keys. You can have up to 4 different keys to choose from. So key index is going to be the number of the key that you're choosing, and then the key is going to be effectively be the password that you're using to get into the network. So all 4 of these options are different ways that you can set up your connection, depending on the type of network that you're using. Now, once you've connected, once you've joined the network, then a lot of this part about you acting as a client and a server is very similar to the Ethernet shield. So instead of an Ethernet client, you've got a Wi-Fi client. So you create a Wi-Fi client if you're acting as a client. And you client connect. So you call client connect, client.connect with an IP address and a port. This is actually the same as with the Ethernet client. And client.stop stops communication. Now, Wi-Fi server, it invokes slightly differently. When you want to act as a server, you call server with a port. It's phrased a little bit differently. And before with the Ethernet, we said server equals Ethernet server port. But it accomplishes the same goal. And then you call server.begin to start the server listening on the port. Actually, that's the same as with the Ethernet library too. Now, scanning for Wi-Fi networks. This is something that you don't generally do with Ethernet. You're not scanning for Ethernet networks. You're plugged into a network and that's that. With Wi-Fi, you often want to scan, look at the networks around you, and pick one to connect to. So that sort of answering the question, which network, which SSID, should I connect to? So one thing is you're going to want to scan for networks. It's very common to scan for networks. So they provide a function, Wi-Fi.scan networks. That returns the number of networks available. It doesn't return the names of networks, just the number. If it found 5 networks, it returns a 5. Now, if you want to find, say there are 5 networks and you want to find the actual names of the networks, SSIDs of the networks, you can call this function Wi-Fi.ssid. You pass it an integer I, and it returns the SSID of the ith network. So if you know there are 5 networks, you can call SSID of 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, and it'll return the SSID of all those networks. Now, often in order to pick the network that you want, you go for highest strength, or that's a common factor, a consideration. So you can also find out the strength of a network by calling RSSI. So if you call Wi-Fi.RSSI, you give it an I, which is the number of the network, it will return the signal strength of the network. It will return you a number from -80 to 0, 0 being the highest strength and -80 lowest strength. And one more thing that's a factor in figuring out what network you want to connect to is the type of encryption used. Maybe you're looking for an open network, something like that. So there's this function encryption type, Wi-Fi.encryption type. You give it an I, which is the number of the network, and it returns the type of encryption used in the network. It returns a code, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on the type of encryption. So 0, I think, is WEP encryption. Whoops. 0 is for WEP, 1 is for WPA, 2 is for WPA2, and then 3 is for no encryption, and then 4 is for multiple possible encryption. Thank you.